It's a new year and a new chance to take a stand against drug use and domestic violence. Education Today starts now.
Happy New Year, everyone. I'm John Zisch with the Armstrong School District. More and more it seems that drug abuse and domestic violence are destroying our communities. That's why there's Armstrong County Community Awareness Day each year. It's an annual awareness blast that is a call to citizens to take action because doing nothing allows addiction and abuse to worsen in our neighborhoods. Armstrong School District is a proud partner in Community Awareness Day, and this year we've invited an outstanding speaker to share his inspirational story with students in grades 7 and 8. He is Mr. Terry Davis with the National Character Education Foundation. Welcome to the show.
I'm honored to be here, really.
Yes. We also have, from the National Character Education Foundation, Ms. Danielle Bayshore.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Norma Purcell.
Yes, hi.
Delighted to have you all.
Glad to be here.
Yes. Would you please tell us briefly about yourselves?
Well, I'm affiliated with the National Character Education Foundation, and I'm a speaker who goes into schools and share a little bit about my background. My background is one of a person who was a former gang leader, former drug dealer, and I go in and share the horrors of that type of lifestyle and the benefits of refusing drugs and alcohol and allowing an opportunity, a chance to be a positive person by making good choices.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Danielle?
I'm also affiliated with the National Character Education Foundation. I also go into schools. I'm a member of the All Pro Action Team. Go into schools and I share my story on substance abuse and how it affected my life at a young age. I started using drugs when I was very young. I was 12 years old, and I'm coming up on 2 years clean. So I share my story with people and let them know how drugs affected my life.
Thank you for doing that.
Wonderful.
And thanks for being here. How about you, Norma?
I'm also with the NCEF. I share my story from a mother's perspective. I have 7 children, and my oldest son is a recovering heroin addict. And I share my story in the way of how it affected my family and how we first knew my son was using drugs, and hopefully get the message out there to people on how they can help.
Right. We certainly hope our audience is tuning in and listening up because we have an important message today. Terry, I'd like to start with you. You were speaking to 7th and 8th grade students next week. Would you please walk us through your eye-opening presentation to students?
Well, one of the first things that I do is as I speak to students is I use a sound that says cling, cling. And it's the sound of someone being locked down in jail. And I make the presentation that's the very most horrifying sound you can hear at a young age or any age. And it causes young people to think. When I share my presentation, I use that phrase throughout to get young people to think about you need to make choices. I use a statement that I've learned over the years that you can choose your pleasure, but you can't choose your consequences. And I begin to tell young people you need to really understand that opportunity for a moment of gratification by artificial substance can lead to a life of pain and decadence, not just for you, but for your loved ones.
Well, kind of walk us through a little bit more. Your presentations are probably for all secondary students. What do you do, that really gets their attention?
I tell them about my background. I tell them how I grew up in Queens, New York, in the late 70s, and was a star athlete and had the opportunity to go to college and had a few things that really opened up for me to have a chance to excel academically and see the nation. But I chose through an injury to take a shortcut towards getting finances. And that shortcut was to sell drugs and guns up and down the East Coast from Miami-Dade Community College to New York. And in that lifestyle, at the age of 19, I became incarcerated because I was robbing drug dealers and selling guns and sentenced to a 15-year sentence where I did 4.5 years. And I realized at that tender time that I had not just affected my life in a negative way, but I've also hindered my mom and dad's aspirations for what they wanted for me as a young man growing up in Queens, New York. So I deal a lot with just making real life choices. I deal a lot with we need to be aware of who our associates are. We need to be aware that we need to make choices that will be monumental towards us taking a momentum to fulfill what we believe that we have the ability to do, as opposed to taking a shortcut just for a second. Because one moment can change your life.
Now I'm curious to hear about the dream that you had at that young age.
Mm-hmm.
You were a star athlete. Can you tell me a little bit about that and
Sure.
where your life was going? Until
Well,
you
I played basketball from the age of 7 years old. It was my way of keeping me, quote unquote, out of trouble. Growing up in a middle class Afro-American home in Queens, New York, it got me an opportunity as a freshman to play varsity basketball against some prominent athletes that we know now, men like Chris Mullin and Spud Webb. I had the opportunity to play against them in high school and college. But the opportunity kind of came to a halt when I got injured, and I realized that my life was wrapped around a ball. And when I didn't see the opportunity to do that, which I've done since the age of 7, someone got my attention of being able to use drugs to deaden the pain for that season, not being able to play, which my identity was wrapped in. And I chose that. And by choosing that, it cost me 4.5 years of my life. I was a cocaine user, a marijuana user, a drinker, excessive drinker. And I found out from the age of 16.5 until 19 years old, when I became incarcerated, that those moments of pleasure cost me 4.5 years of my life that I never could get back. I'm very grateful that it was an eye-opener. I survived the prison scene. I survived the gang scene. They released me to go on because I got involved in a lot of youth activity that caused me to speak in various places, schools, churches, things like that. But many have not walked away from what I was involved in, and I'm very grateful for that. So I get an opportunity to share that with young people, to take advantage of what you have, because it could be gone in a moment.
Right. And we'll be hearing more from you on next week's program in detail. But before we go on to our other guests, I was wondering if you'd please share some of the horror stories that maybe open up the young people's eyes when you share them about either a life of incarceration or pushing drugs.
Well, the selling of drugs, to be totally honest, I really can't say it was a fearful horror story, because I was high when I was doing it. So, when you take drugs, I always say sometimes using drugs is the anesthesia for stupidity and ego. So when I was using the drugs, I really had no fear. I had a forced sense of courage, because it was induced by antisocial activity and drugs. But when I became incarcerated, even the day that I was high, the day I was incarcerated, I became sober in like 10 seconds. And the reality of that cling, cling sound and the horrors that I heard of men being hurt and hurting each other and cussing out guards and all types of things like that, this really made me realize at a very young age, at 19 years old, that I may not survive this. I may not be able to be out there with my mom and my 2 other brothers and my dad. And every day was, not to belittle the war, but every day was like a war zone. Because when you stepped out your cell, if someone wanted your tennis shoes, if someone wanted your little commissary, little Debbie cakes, you could die for that. And the reality of the matter is, I realized that it was frightening, but I was very grateful that I had the opportunity to make friends with some people who wanted to change their life, which caused me to go back to school while incarcerated, get my associate degree, and now I'm working towards my doctorate now. So it was frightening, because every day you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that almost sounds too important to pass up. Who was this inspirational figure in jail that you met, and how did he?
His name was KP. His name was KP, a little guy about 5'7", 5'8". He ran the prison, and I didn't know he ran the prison, but I wound up being in his cell. And when I walked through the corridors of that tier, he made arrangements by a couple of packs of cigarettes to get me to be in his cell. And he basically told me there's 3 things you're going to do. 1, you're not going to get high in here. 2, you're going to get out of here. And 3, you're going to finish school and go out and share. Don't come out. Don't come into this place. And based upon his influence in my life, a former drug dealer who died while incarcerated, I had the privilege and pleasure of going around and talking to young people around the nation.
Well, thank you very much, Terry, for that overview. And we'll hear more next week in detail about some of your experiences. But now I'd like to turn to Danielle, our next guest, and hear a little bit about what it is that you share with students in schools when you talk to them.
Well, when I go into schools, I share my story about substance abuse and the active life of addiction. I started using drugs when I was 12 years old. I was in 6th grade.
It's too young.
It is too young, definitely too young. And it's happening more and more. Kids at a young age are starting to use drugs. But I was 12 years old when I started using. I was in the 6th grade, and nobody knew that I was using. Everything about my life was normal. I was a cheerleader, I played soccer, basketball, I was in choir, band, you know, the all-American 6th grader. Everyone in my community knew me. I was normal growing up. But when I got into middle school, things changed. My friends changed, my behavior changed, my grades changed. I was always an honor roll student until 6th or 7th grade. And I started failing everything. You know, I wasn't going to school, things like that. The warning signs that my parents should have seen that they never saw. But by the time I was in high school, I was failing out of school. I had to repeat the 11th grade 3 times almost until I finally dropped out. So I share my story on, I think there was 7 years of active addiction and what it's like to be 12, 13, 14 and using drugs on a daily basis and having nobody know, really. I mean, people knew, but they didn't know the extent of it. So I like to get my story out there and let people know that there's a better way to live and that they don't have to live their life addicted to drugs.
If I could follow up on just something you said, how in the world did you get started at age 12 on drugs?
Well, I was 12 years old. I was in the 6th grade, and I have 2 brothers and 4 sisters. So they're all but one of them are older than me, and I kind of followed in their path. They didn't use drugs their whole life like I had, but they did experiment with drugs. So the first time I actually used was with an older brother, and my parents had no reason to think that anything like that was going to happen because he was my brother, you know. So the first time I used was with my brother, but also a lot of my friends had influenced that too. Like the change in friends in high school or in middle school. You know, when you go into middle school, there's a transition that you go through, whether you realize it or not. Middle school is a big deal, and you meet new people, schools combine, and I found new friends, and I found new things to experiment with. And it all started out as an experiment. I never thought that I would become addicted to drugs the first time that I used them.
Wow. Well, I certainly would love to hear more about that in detail in our next week's show, and maybe after the break. But now I'd like to turn to Norma Purcell to talk from the parent perspective. I was wondering if you'd please just give us your highlights in the next 3 or 4 minutes about what you share at schools or with parents.
Well, mostly what I share is that my son is a recovering heroin addict. He is 20 years old now, and he was put in rehab when he was 16. I have 7 children, so the impact on our family was tremendous. And it took a long time to get everybody back together, and the healing process, it kind of blew our walls out. You have to almost live the experience as a parent and trying to save your child's life and really not knowing where to begin or where it's going to go on a daily basis, sleeping outside his bedroom and wondering where he is when he walks outside the house and wondering if he's going to be okay today. The every minute of the day worry of whether he's going to be alive, you know, and arriving home for dinner. I think that the way it affected the rest of my children is something that a lot of kids deal with because everybody knows someone that's using drugs or has used drugs or has heard that they might be using drugs, and it has an effect on everybody depending on your personality. And having 7 children, it affected all my children very differently.
Wow. Well, I would like to hear more about that after the break. We're going to take a short break from Armstrong School District's education today. We'll be right back with our guests, Mr. Terry Davis, Daniel Bayshore, and Norma Purcell. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
More than 100 academic majors, more than 230 clubs and organizations. Great things happen here every day. There are students just like you right here. There are also people who aren't anything like you from many walks of life and from all around the world. At IUP, it's all about having choices. Indiana University of Pennsylvania, the perfect fit.
Welcome back to Armstrong School District's Education Today. I'm John Zish with the Armstrong School District. My guests are Terry Davis, Daniel Bayshore, and Norma Purcell, all with the National Character Education Foundation. Before the break, we were talking a little bit with you, Norma, about your son's addiction and recovery. And I was wondering if you could please tell me, how did you begin to get help for your son?
Actually, Thomas really came to us when it got really bad. I remember one Sunday morning walking out into the garage and finding Thomas's car, his vehicle was just smashed from one end to the next on the driver's side. And I remember thinking the only way it could be that way is if he had crossed a path, crossed the other lane. And so I went right upstairs and asked him what happened to his car last night. And he was completely knocked out. He was, still recovering from his binge that night. And as I was walking out, I told him to get up and get ready to come downstairs to talk to his dad and I. And as I was walking out the room, I saw a bunch of drugs on his dresser, particularly a bag of mushrooms. And when I held that bag up to him and asked him what it was, he immediately passed it on to one of his friends or, somebody else other than himself. He came downstairs then and we got the whole story. At that time, he told us that he had progressed to heroin. He had been in treatment and trying to get help before that through family counseling and things like that. And we immediately started the process of getting him into a rehab center, which was very, very difficult. We ended up putting him into Kids Peace National Hospital for Children in Crisis. He went there within 24 hours, and he started a detox program and very detailed evaluations. And he was there for 10 days. This all happened right before Christmas. And he did return home for Christmas, and then in January, he was working and was driving our Suburban to work and decided to take a detour to a friend's house, which he did. And his friend's father allowed him to have a few beers. And then on his way to work, he crashed the Suburban into a tree. So that all led to an underage drinking charge and surrendering his license. And then 3 days later, he was admitted into Clearbrook Lodge, a rehab center up in Wilkes-Barre.
That's, all of you have shared some very painful stories, but we're hoping some good can come out of it, and we thank you for sharing them with the public through the National Character Education Foundation, and we'll all talk more about this. But there's one question I was wondering if we could sort of just bat around, and based on your own experiences, what will solve our nation's epidemic of being addicted to drugs? And also, what causes a person to actually start? Do you have any insights on that? And we can just go around.
The desire to start, I think with my son in particular, was I think he started feeling depression first, and he was looking for friends that would kind of help him feel a little bit better in the activities they were involved in, and unfortunately that was smoking cigarettes and getting high, and that's what started it with Thomas. And as far as stopping the epidemic goes, the desire for drugs is where it needs to be stopped, and that's quite a battle.
You may have a particular insight on this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that everyone starts using drugs for different reasons, but kind of the same. I know a lot of my friends that use drugs. We all kind of battled with the same problems. And like she said, I suffered from severe depression, and that's whenever I started using drugs. But the thing is, no one ever stopped it at the beginning. I didn't stop it at the beginning. My family didn't stop it at the beginning. My friends didn't stop it at the beginning. And it continued to progress. Like I said before, when I picked up that first drug, I didn't know I wouldn't be able to put it down. So the key would be not to pick up that first drug so that I wouldn't have to put that last one down. No one ever educated me on what would really happen if I used drugs. It was always, this is your brain on drugs. It was never, you're going to sell your things, you're going to fail school, you're going to drop out of school, you're going to be nothing. No one ever told me that. It was always more the physical effects of the drugs, not the mental and emotional effects of the drugs.
So what might have helped you, correct me if I'm wrong, is more than just a message or a slogan, maybe a detailed look of what an addict goes through? If there was somehow some way to package that and give it to kids and educate them that way, I don't know.
Well, I think there is, and I think that's what both Terry and I do, and Norma, going around and letting people know, this is what will happen to you. I mean, yes, this is your brain and this is your brain on drugs, but there's so much more to it. You could die. You could be incarcerated for half of your life or part of your life, and you'll never get that back. I could have died, and no one told me that.
Yes, I think, we grew up in the generation of say no to drugs. Our children are growing up being educated in school, say no to drugs, and yet there still are so many kids trying drugs.
That's what I'm getting at, right?
The message has to be so much more than this is what drugs will be to you. It has to be the very big picture of things that like Danielle has gone through, and Terry has gone through, and my family has gone through. Siblings have to be repaired. Relationships that take so much longer, the damage that was done, it takes so long to repair that, and it's all destroyed so quickly.
Maybe a major motion picture or something that could really take you inside the life of an addict would help, or something like that everyone could see on a large scale. How about you, Terry? What are your insights on this particular question?
My insights is I didn't start using drugs. I started out drinking. Basketball growing up, having a few beers, and I believe the greatest issue we have in our society is the base that we are a very impulsive and addictive society. And I think alcohol is a platform to many other avenues that will exacerbate people's difficulties in other areas. If you have a low self-esteem, if you have a need for having acceptance with friends who may be popular but not necessarily straight, cool, and sober. And for me, it started out with just drinking beer after basketball. I'm a PK, which is a preacher's kid. So I hid my alcohol consumption, which wasn't major, but it was a platform for me to experiment and to be accepted. And then it became a crutch when I saw that things wasn't going well. I can get immediate artificial stimulation that would change my reality from the pain I was feeling. And I think in our nation right now, we're suffering with a generation that does not know how to deal with their pain. So therefore, they are used to microwave answers and microwave solutions to dealing with pain that is a part of life. You got to have pain in your life to understand experiences. Hopefully not the pain that I've went through or she went through, but if we can learn to use the pain to be guidelines to keep us from certain parameters, it'd be real. Instead of us as detonate with anti-association and anti-activity, as well as drugs that are definitely not a part of what God wants in our lives, or people or friends that are positive.
You said something that needs to be said again, is that alcohol.
It's the greatest drug there is in this nation.
No, there was never a great headline in the newspaper that said, "Man did something incredible because of alcohol." It's always the opposite. You always see the bad headlines because of alcohol. People shouldn't take that lightly. I mean, in Armstrong County, part of Community Awareness Day is getting people to realize that you can't have a lax attitude towards alcohol. Even the parents who might try and give it to an underage teen, that's a crime. It's also a gateway, as you explained, to other drugs.
Absolutely.
In many cases.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And now I'd just like to open up generally to the three of you. Is there anything else that you'd like to share from your experiences for the benefit of our viewers? Anything that you feel compelled to say?
Well, I do feel compelled to say that if you're using drugs, or you think that it's a big joke, it's not a joke. And that there is a better way to live, and that through not using drugs and finding out who I am and doing the things that I do, like I found a better way to live, and that I can be someone. But the first thing that I needed to do was ask somebody. So, like, what I want to say is, if you have a problem, there's people that will help you. I always thought that I was going to get in trouble, and actually what I did was I went to a principal the first time, and I didn't get in any trouble, and I found that people were there to support me, and I got the help that I needed. And a big part of me was afraid that I was going to get in trouble. And I just want to say that you're not going to get in trouble, and that there are people that want to help you if you have a problem.
You mentioned something that makes me wonder, how would your life have been different without drugs? Was there a certain dream that you thought you may have gone for, or that you maybe can't do, or is delayed, or something like that?
It's been delayed, definitely delayed, but I know now the way that I live, there's nothing I can't do. I can do anything I want to do. I'm currently going to college, where before college was nothing to me. I had to drop out of school in 11th grade because I couldn't function normally. And now I can do anything I want to do.
That's
good. It's amazing.
I like to hear that. That is a very encouraging
Thank
story.
you.
Does anyone else have anything to share for the benefit of the viewers?
I think what I would like to say is for parents to know their children's friends and families. I thought I pretty much covered that with a lot of my children, and where I did lack was where I should not have been lacking, and that was not knowing all of them, especially the ones that they're spending most of the time with. My son got most of his drugs, and especially his alcohol, from friends, parents. Sometimes a lot of parents believe that as long as the children are drinking in their home and they have their car keys, that they are
Somehow safe.
That's just wrong. Well, first of all, it's against the law,
Right.
and all parties involved can get in serious trouble because of that. Offering a child, a minor, in any alcohol, it's wrong. And he did get a lot of his drugs and alcohol from parents. And I would highly stress: know your children's friends, know their parents, make friends with them. You know, you have the right to know where your child is, and if you want them to continue that kind of friendship.
Very good. Very good advice.
I say be nosy, parents. The one reason I left home after finishing high school is because I knew my parents were going to be nosy about my antisocial activity. And I hit it well because at the time in high school I was just drinking. But when I got to college my freshman year, it was just totally exacerbated. And I believe one of the greatest problems that I'm seeing as I travel around the nation is that parents are trying to be friends instead of being parents. And you need to be in their drawers, you need to be in their tennis shoes, you need to be looking on a laptop, you need to be in everything they're doing. You have a right to take ownership of their room and their space. They may have on the door, keep out, that doesn't mean you. And I think one of the greatest issues and saddest things I see is that when parents are trying to be friends, they're trying to just have one conversation about what Johnny or Sue or Rashid is doing, instead of having an ongoing dialogue. I think my situations that I went through really helped my parents in dealing with my other two brothers. They just didn't take things for granted. They became exceptionally nosy. They were better than Peter Falk and Columbo. I mean, they found out all kind of stuff. And I think if we take that type of attitude, it would really help us as parents and in our communities to take ownership of what our families and our communities are doing. Get involved, ask questions. Don't just let them give you the padded answers. Pop up at places. I remember the last thing my father did before I left home was I used to use his car, and he used to check the speedometer to see if I really went what I said. And he would check the ashtrays, and he'd look under there. I mean, he would come in and say, "Let me smell your breath." And I was like, "Dad, you know," but I realized it didn't deter me, but now it helped me realize that he was concerned, and I had to make a decision to get out from that type of environment. And that led me to understand that with my own son, who's 13, that I'm going to be the most nosiest dad in the world.
That's right, you better.
I have to be.
Well, thank you very much for that, Terry. I appreciate that.
Honored to be here with you.
Danielle, thank you. And Norma, we
You're
appreciate it. That's our show for today. I'd like to thank our three guests, Terry Davis, Danielle Bayshore, and Norma Purcell, all with the National Character Education Foundation. I'd also like to thank the TV students of West Shamokin High School, led by Mr. Ren Steele, and the TV students of Elderton High School, led by Dr. Bobby Hamill. They were our film crew today. Please join us again next week for another look at the Armstrong School District. Visit our website for updated information about the district, and have a great week.